everyone, welcome or welcome back. If you're new, I'm Periwinkle Jellyfish, and I'm a silly little person that draws silly little characters. Today I will be redesigning the avatar I use to represent myself online. So obviously this is a somewhat important drawing compared to my other ones, although I do love my drawings equally. For this, I wanted to add a parasol with little dangly effects to kind of accentuate the jellyfish theming. Also, I've seen a lot of people who design jellyfish-themed characters have a little parasol or an umbrella, usually with danglies with it, so it seems like that's the rule for creating jellyfish-themed characters. If you're going to create a jellyfish-themed character, you need to add a parasol of some kind, so, oh well. Looking back, I might have added too many details because little did I know that going forward this would be one of the hardest things I have ever drawn. So everything starts out really simple and easy on the rough sketch and just getting my ideas down on paper. I'm working on my hair, deciding what length I want it to be, and now I'm working on the clothes. I wanted to add little dangly effects to my overall outfit so that the silhouette kind of looks like a jellyfish. I don't want things to be underwater themed, but still have that dangly jellyfishy effect with it. I recreated my rough sketch onto Clip Studio Paint off camera, generally because doing the same thing twice in a row is just really boring. And now we go into the first thing that went wrong while making this. So I decided that on a semi-important drawing, I was going to experiment with an entirely new way to organize my folders and layers and files in Clip Studio Paint. And in my head, it would go really well, but didn't go as well as I thought it would. You'll see what problems arise from this method later. I want to mention, to those of you who liked my chibi art style, don't worry, it hasn't gone anywhere. I'm still going to use it, but I just really wanted to redesign my avatar while the idea for it was still fresh in my head. So don't worry, it hasn't gone anywhere. We're going to use it again soon. Anyway, now we are just doing the line art, and so far, I thought everything was going great and going well. But it was around this point that I realized just how many effects and overlapping transparent pieces I had planned for this, and I started to realize I might have messed up. So I was just trying not to panic, stay calm. It's just a little bit of a complicated detail, but we'll figure it out. We just have those little dangly effects. I wanted them to be transparent, so oh well, I'll just have the lines below it be still apparent so that I can see them and still have that effect going on. But I had to erase around a couple of things and just figure out what I was doing, and now we're working with the rest of the hair, and there were just so many dang details in this thing. But I kept telling myself that I would love the finished result and it would turn out great. So I just kept on going and trusting the process, hopefully. So now I'm adding that necklace choker thing of pearls, I guess. And I'm just trying to take things one step at a time, make the rough sketch go invisible occasionally to see what I'm looking at and make sure that the overlapping details aren't acting up weird. Then I started getting a little battery on my Apple Pencil. Yeah. I made my sleeves kind of long and droopy because I really like long droopy sleeves that kind of drift down over my hands but not over my fingers, if that makes sense. I just kind of like that. I'm adding even more dangly effects because apparently the parasol wasn't enough. So now I'm just adding a couple more and moving on to the skirt and other layers of the dress. So now I have two transparent and little top effects for the dress, and I'm making things a little bit thinner, and because I felt like it was a little bit too poofy in the rough sketch and just looked a little bit different from the thing on paper, and I just couldn't pinpoint what exactly it was, so I had to just take a quick look and adjust a few things a little bit. There are so many dang details in this thing that just are transparent or overlapping or moving in separate directions, so it was a lot to keep track of and figure out what was happening in this thing. Okay. So now I'm working on the eyes, which was the generally least hard part of this. Yeah. So I'm just quickly working on this, getting those lashes down, a little bit of makeup because I generally like putting on makeup whenever I'm going out in public, and a really long droopy bow earring. Now then, we are moving on to adjusting the head a little bit because I thought maybe that's what feels different from the rough sketch on paper to the line art on this, so I decided to adjust a few things and try to figure out what was wrong here. In the end, I thought I had it, so now I moved on to the little jellyfish. Yeah. So now, what am I doing next? I am adjusting the eyes and trying to figure out what I want for them with the overlap. Then I realized that they would probably still be visible since they're behind a see-through dangly effect of the parasol. So I colored them back in, and now we move on to coloring. But little did I know, there would be so much paint that comes with it! Yay! Now, while I'm going over the hair, I'm going to explain what about this new process for my folders and layers of line art and coloring was a horrible idea. So, for some reason, I decided to have one folder have clothes and skin, and one folder have eyes, one folder have hair, etc., etc., and, I thought this would work. So, the hair layer would have the hair line art and then the hair coloring as well with it. Then the clothes would have the clothes and the coloring in the same folder, so that if I need to adjust a few things, then the entirety of it will stay with it as well. But there was a few problems with this plan that I only realized until after I did the hair. The lower layered folders are going to be very susceptible to overlap, and coloring in will go over the line art in lower folders. It's hard to explain, but simply put, it's not very effective. And I was just dying throughout the entirety of the parts past this, or past coloring in the hair, because I just had to constantly be erasing around the line art, be erasing around stuff, be using tiny, tiny, tiny little brushes, that to the point that I was basically just doing pixel art. Yeah, that was fun. So, simply put, to anyone who doesn't use Clip Studio Paint or many drawing softwares, digital drawing softwares, simply put, this made things so much longer and more unnecessary than they would have been for a already pretty complicated drawing. So, am I ever going to use this experimentative process again? Heck no. I'm trying to keep the variety of colors in the hair streakies, not too drastic and too drastic changes. And the problem is with pastel color palettes like this, the tiniest amount of darkening will have such a big effect. So you have to be so careful with the amount of darkening that you use. Once I was done with this though, the hair I could move on to the clothes, and this is when I realized just how bad my idea for folders really was. Things were starting out great until I realized what was going on with the hair, and I was so confused at first at what this is, what's happening here. But as I was doing the rest of the pearls, things started to click together. And I tried to use the bucket tool to color in the rest of the clothes, and I realized just how bad this plan was and how it was almost impossible to color around this, so I almost scrapped the entire thing just because of this, and I ended up having to just very carefully color around this and just try my best to not go over the hair. Yeah, that was fun. You may notice that I'm coloring over a few other things that already seem to be needing their own colors, and don't worry, those things are transparent and I need them to have color underneath them to add a bit more depth. And now I'm erasing around the line art so that there's no overlap, and I had to use such a tiny little brush, such a tiny little baby brush, just to get around the line art. And this was so much more tedious in real time. This drawing took me almost 2 hours when compared to usually an hour or an hour and a half. So about half an hour worth of just mistakes because of this new little process that I decided to experiment with. So that's nice. That's nice. So now I'm being as careful as I possibly can when coloring around the hair, but yeah, my options were use a big brush, get a lot of overlap, or a tiny brush that will take more time but less overlap, but I still would have to erase around it either way, so yeah, that was fun. In other words, I was whittling around overlap, but also whittling down my sanity. So yeah. Anyway, I am almost done with the really hard part, so we're almost there. I later remembered that I can just color in around the hair manually, and then just use the bucket tool around that so that I don't have any really bad overlap and can still use the bucket tool to hopefully save a little bit of time. So once I realized that saved a good amount of time, and I could continue everything else fairly smoothly. Now I'm coloring in around the bow, and now we are moving on to the little skirt, which was by far the easiest part of the dress itself. So I'm just quickly coloring this in, finally able to use big brushes again, and just being careful around the edges because I still really hate coloring outside the lines. I'm very persnickety about these things. And now we are done with quite possibly one of the hardest parts of this holding outfit. Now we are moving on to the little back cape part of the dress, and I decided to make this a darker color than the rest of it, just make it stand out a little bit. And now I'm adding a kind of sparkly, marbled effect similar to the transparent parts of the dress, but it's not transparent. Now I'm adding a little bit of blue accents to the choker, the bow, and a few other things. So that little butterfly thing on her sleeve, it's hard to tell when the hair is covering it, but yeah. Anyway, now I am getting into working on the parasol, one of the big details of this drawing. I decided to add a lot of purpley silver to this, just because I felt like it was a nice accent piece and worked fairly well with everything else along, just like that light blue did. So now I just have to be very careful around the clothing and body line art because it'll overlap around that too. So that's nice. But now that I had developed good ways to counter this and work around it, things were fairly more smooth sailing. Now I'm coloring in that little jellyfish and making it a nice, vibrant purple. And now I'm just coloring in those little, what are they called? Tentacles? I prefer to call them the droopy dangly things. I am now accompanied by a dog, and I believe she has things to say. Would you like to say anything, Estelle, about this? Apparently those are her very wise words. The closer I got to finishing things up and getting the hard details past me, the more determined I got. So I'm adding a little bit of a glowy effect to the jellyfish and moving on to other things like the heels and the tights. I added a bit of a spacey effect because I still love space, just not as much as I did before. At this point, things are starting to come together and starting to look the way I pictured it, so with that, I was even more determined to get this thing done, and yeah. So now we are getting down to one of the most important parts of this drawing, the transparent see-through details. This is very important because this is like 40% of the whole dang thing. So yeah. First up, I'm getting the transparent things around the dress, and then those tentacly things by the skirt to mimic a jellyfish, and yeah. We're finishing up those little details and moving on to the bow. So we're just getting all those little details down, and then the ribbons. This was a little bit tedious, but it was fairly quick. So just bear with me for a moment, and we're getting to the little twist. And now we can move on to adding some sparkly effects to the transparent things as well. These are some of the final details, and things are really starting to come together now and give the effect I want it to give. So now I just need to finish up on the details on the little jellyfish. I started out with full opacity for the dangly effects, and then once I was done coloring all of those in, I would lower the opacity to see the final effect. So now I'm just coloring everything in as quickly as I possibly can. This would be way quicker with the bucket tool, but for some parts of it, I can't, so, you know, that's nice. So now I'm just finishing up those last little details using a little bit of bucket tool, and there we go. There's a little bit of lower opacity, and now we add the sparkly details. Now I'm erasing the little color theme guide in the bottom left and moving on to coloring in my skin. But the only problem was here that I had to color her around the hair and erase around the hair again, so that's a little bit of a tedious effect, so yay! So now I'm coloring around the transparent effects, the overlapping effects, the line art on lower folders, and just trying my best to not do it. I lost my train of thought. Not to color outside the lines. There we go. Woo! With the glowing jellyfish, the skin color is a little bit wonky, but oh well, it's just the lighting. So now I'm done with that, and I can move on to coloring in the eyes. So I started to erase a little bit of the skin color, and then just tried to map out the white area of the eyes, which I always forget the name to. One day I'm gonna look it up and write it down like a smart person, but just not today. So I'm coloring in the eyes and making them a stormy blue. And now I'm adding a little bit of detail and with the dappled light brush. Now I'm adding just a little bit of makeup, and I'm coloring in the eyes of the jellyfish. I think it looks really cute. So now I am coloring in the line art and going over things. This is part of my rendering process. We're in the home stretch now. So now we are just doing some of the final effects and just going over things as quickly as I can, because at this point I just really wanted to be done with it because I was tired and had been drawing for a while now. So I was just finishing this up, ending coloring things in, going over a few details. And what's next? I'm going over to the eyebrows and coloring that in too. Then I realized I forgot to color in one of my hands, so I had to do that as well. Now we are moving on to the final part of rendering. And it was at this point that I realized I had made a horrible mistake. So I quickly got to fixing that, and I quickly realized what the problem was, so that's better than not knowing what on earth is happening. So I just had to quickly redo the eyes and just fix that, and then I could go back to the rendering, and this time I didn't create something slightly horrifying. So now this is just a little bit of erasing around the edges for shading, and we're finally done. Despite how challenging this was, I am really happy with how it turned out, and I really like this design. So thank you so much for seeing this video through to the end. And we'll be seeing a lot more of this design in the future, hopefully. Anyway, thank you so much for seeing this video through to the end, and I believe that's all. Bye!